to try and see if we are indeed streaming, and I can retweet that there linky to. I don't see anything, so I guess I'm going to have to pull it out of YouTube itself. We should have quite a bit of time. Again, we're 55 minutes up to lock, and obviously only 2 games. We should have more than enough time to figure this out. Let's go ahead and find out where we are streaming. It is here. Look, it's a picture of me. I am looking haggard and like I need a shave. Let's retweet this sucker and get this show on the road. Hey, look, there, it's me. Thanks, whomever did that. Alright. So 2 game slate. Again, giving you the 10-second version of a 5-minute spiel. I do believe in varying the size of your wagers in DFS. I think it is important to not consistently play the same amount every day. And at present, I see no reason that this is a particularly lush environment for profit. So I would be, based on what we know, 55 minutes to lock, a little more conservative with this former 2-game slate. There will be rankings for the later 3-game slate. There are no rankings for this slate, but we're throwing up an extra show just so we can discuss it a little bit with everyone. We will save the rankings for the arguably better slate. Beat you out with your question there. See? Someone asked me right as I said that. One set of ranks a day for confusion and technical reasons, among other things, but those will be up for the later slate, which is larger and in theory has more people. So 2 games here. Portland going to Dallas, Los Angeles visiting the city of Toby and Bobby. So let's start talking about this earlier game. Looking at the 2 main slates, the thing that stands out is how badly priced this entire game is on FanDuel. FanDuel really wants you to play guys from the second game. Certainly the Lakers, most specifically, which are priced pretty advantageously, even better than DK in a couple places on FanDuel. A brief note on just 2-game slates in general. I do strongly believe in trying to focus on one game in the long term being the more profitable strategy. It's just a real simple way for you to get an edge where if you play one game to stay close and the other one to blow out and you get it right, you have a lot of trouble failing on a slate of such a minuscule size. So I do think, long term, if you play this or any 2-game slate out many times, I do think generally you are going to want to, jump the hell on one game a bit more than the other one. Looking up and seeing if the lines have changed at all. Again, I don't do a ton of the line analysis. It tends to be overstated, but when you're looking at a slate of this size, it seems relevant. Again, the former game is an over-under of about 220. The second one about 235, so certainly a little bit more merit towards stacking that one, although Philadelphia is a larger favorite than Portland. Portland on the road is about a 4-point favorite. Philadelphia at home is about 7.5 or 8-point favorite. One other thing I want to mention real quick is that basing your plays purely on data is always a pretty bad way to go. If you have to base it on just one thing, data would be the way to go. But just doing data tends to be bad, and post-trade deadline tends to be especially specious. Looking at Dallas, for example, I have had multiple people today say to me, well, against Dallas in the past, this guy on Portland did this. And I've had other people say, well, I really like Damian Lillard because of, Dallas's bad backcourt defense. Dallas is playing their, 60th game of the year, give or take, and they played the first 58 of those with the starting lineup that include frequently Dennis Smith Jr. and almost constantly Wes Matthews and DeAndre Jordan and Harrison Barnes. So I will stop there, but I shouldn't have to go into a terribly long polemic about why not the greatest idea to be using season-long rankings for whatever, defensive efficiency versus position, DVP, whatever, already pretty bad crap you were using, probably legitimately terrible for you right now if you're trying to use it to throw in some lineups. That being said, it's a 2-game slate. As long as you pick players who are playing, you're probably roughly up there, equal with the rest of the world, but let's go ahead and see if we can take that 15% rake and cut a few points off of it and save people some money. So, Let us talk about Portland first. Favored on the road. Probably my favorite play on Portland would be Yusuf Nurkic. Um, has just an absolutely massive upside. Has been a little while since it's been expressed. Was decent in the San Antonio game recently. Um, Ended up in foul trouble in the Miami game previously, dealing with Whiteside, etc. But I hear people saying be concerned about his minutes and things like that. He's got the job. We don't really need to be concerned about his minutes anymore. He's in a close game, which we have no reason to expect this not to be. Should be playing 32, 34, 36 minutes, some significant amount of minutes. And again, there is no DeAndre Jordan there. There is no one of any significant heft to be able to handle to be able to manage the load that is Yusuf Nurkic. So is it worth it, Yusuf Nurkic? I think so. Neither someone else. I also heard today 2 different people said to me, "Don't you think they play Powell more against Nurkic?" Powell and Maxi Kleber are almost exactly the same size. One may be like an inch taller than the other, but they're literally both 6'10 or 6'11 and 240, 245 pounds. Like, they're the same size dude. So my guess as of right now, and I don't think we've seen this confirmed yet, is that Dallas continues to run Maxi Kleber out there as the starter. In a raw point sense, that would make me a little bit more inclined towards Chewy shirt. Yeah, I'm wearing a Chewy shirt. They do have one right up where I am. So yes, indeedly doodly. I am wearing a Chewy shirt. Chewy's. But yeah, so long story short, and I haven't had time to look at Yahoo again. I've been largely living out of my bed the last few days, dealing with some medical issues, which should work out fine. But I don't have access, or at least haven't yet managed to give myself access to Yahoo in an easily digestible format on my phone. So plenty of research today, but most of it on my ass on a heating pad, FanDuel and DraftKings. So again, we have tons of time. So happy to take a look now that I am indeed sitting back at my desk. But just a caveat that the first run through on all this stuff likely won't contain that. So you are spending well more on Powell than Kleber everywhere. But I do think Kleber starts, and that does make me like Powell more, just because I think Kleber gets more Yusuf Nurkic, which makes it more likely that Kleber gets in foul trouble, and Powell gets more Myers Leonard in effect, and that is easier than Yusuf Nurkic and less likely that he gets in foul trouble. So again, the price, you have to factor that in there, but as of right now, I'd be a little more excited to run Powell in a tournament lineup than Maxi Kleber. I gotta turn down my volume. Josh Hart is available. Thank you, K-Ship. I appreciate you being there for me, as you always have been. Still don't really want to play Josh Hart. No huge analysis there. Makes your KCP shares and other things a little less exciting. The Lakers, at least certainly in that Boston game, ran a pretty tight rotation. So looking for their more peripheral pieces, it seems difficult at the moment. But we will get there when we get to the second game. So anyhow, like Nurkic, there's no reason that he can't do his. I mean, I don't think you get his 5x5, 20 and 10, 70 point, whatever the hell thing here. But it's a really good spot. And DK, where he's 7,700, that's really good. He may be the breast. He may be the breast. He's the tits. Sorry, that joke just wrote itself. He may be the best play on the slate. He's at least close to it. Center is tough for me because there's 4 centers I really want to play on DraftKings. Spoiler, their names are Yusuf Nurkic, JaVale McGee, Joel Embiid, and Boban Marjanovic, which we will get to forthwith. So, so again, looking again at those Trailblazers, Nurkic, the one I'm most attracted to. Others are going to be site-dependent, looking FanDuel and DK, based purely in any sort of points per dollar sense. I would prefer CJ McCollum to Damian Lillard by just a hair on FanDuel. I prefer Lillard pretty significantly on DK. I have no issue playing him with Nurkic. A lot of lineups I have would have both those guys. They both feel just reasonably significantly underpriced in a matchup I really like at this point. It is worth discussing the Dallas defense at this point. It's significantly worse. They got rid of a lot of average to slightly above average defenders to legitimately good ones, to guys who are not as good as that. Many of them are average to a little bit below average. I've talked a lot about Luka's defense with a couple different people over the last couple of days. I would still place him as, slightly below average on the NBA scale. He's fine. He's not as dreadful as I thought he would be at the beginning of the year. But Yeah, the Boban love is someone said, what's with the Boban love? It's based on the fact that I think he plays almost certainly. It's not a matchup I'm super worried about for him. The matchup is really good against that second unit of the Lakers, where I really want to look to target centers when possible because of how that's played out, and seeing either their small ball five or maybe little bits of Tyson Chandler isn't the best, but I still think the matchup is overall very good there, and maybe Embiid doesn't play, and if he plays, maybe they play less, and this game has a non-irrelevant 8-point spread, so maybe this game blows out. There's just lots of ways I can imagine Boban sort of crushing his 3K price tag on DK. FanDuel, it's really hard to go there, especially when it's hard to spend all that money. Like, you don't really get the advantage of playing a super cheap guy because there's not that many places to spend that money. You can. It allows you to play, overpriced 76ers and overpriced other guys, but I'm a little more inclined to play, say, Nurkic on FanDuel at center. But, you got to make a stand if you want to take a shot at actually taking some big money on a 2-game slate. And Boban, I don't think, will be popular enough that there should be, I don't know. We'll see. We'll look at ownership in a second. But there's enough reasons to like Boban on a 2-game slate. That's the theory there we're discussing. So, yeah, I guess sort of handled that. Regarding the rest, the forwards, we'll call them generally, for the Trailblazers, they've been giving Jake Layman a pile of time. I can't not admit that Jake Layman seems, at his current price, points per dollar, what they're charging for him, a reasonably solid play. Now, I will go on record as saying I don't know how long this continues. He is getting time over Evan Turner and Mo Harkless and several other guys, and he's not as good at basketball as they are. He's just not. He's a hell of a shooter. But there's this isn't a team that it's a strange decision by Terry Stotts, I'll put it that way. Like, they've routinely given this guy 25, 30 minutes, blowouts, full run. He's not getting the start right now. They're giving that to Harkless. They've now brought in Rodney Hood, which is making these 2, 3, 4 minutes even a little more dicey. Some of these minutes have come from, blowout game. The game Nurkic was in trouble. Most of those minutes just translated straight to Myers Leonard. But at the moment, I have to say if I have to play one of them, it's Jake Layman with some concern. But it's a good matchup and too cheap, especially on DK. FanDuel, don't really want to pay, I think it's like $4,800 is the number on Jake Layman. You're starting to have out the upside there where you don't get a 3-point bonus, and this is not a dude who is going to collect a lot of rebounds or put up a lot of defensive stats, so you really need like 25 real points for Jake Layman to win you a tournament. But that being said, dude's getting them shots, so overall I'm pretty critical of the Jake Layman experience right now. That being said, especially on DraftKings, he has to look like one of the better value plays. I would be more inclined to look at other upside guys in the same price range. I am probably a little more interested in playing Trey Burke. I've already mentioned Boban. I would probably look for guys that I think are going to be a little less popular and carry with them a little more upside. I would have to sit there for a while and think about Jake Layman or Rodney Hood. But I would probably go Rodney Hood for what I expect to be lower ownership. But yeah, if I'm running one of those guys out there in a tournament, my order at this point is probably... In a tournament for me, it would probably be Hood, Layman, Harkless, Turner. For all those, 3,600 to 4,800, depending what site you're looking at, guys. If I'm hoping to pull down a tournament upside, I'm not excited about any of them because between all of them and Al-Farouq Aminu, who no one is going to play, like even if you think Al-Farouq Aminu plays 24 minutes, it's not that impossible to imagine that against a pretty poor defensive Dallas team, he randomly between whatever steals, blocks, threes gives you 35 fantasy points and wins the day at 6% owned because no one's going to own him because his minutes are going to shit, and that makes a ton of sense. He's a really low usage guy. I don't want to do it, but he should be in your pool if you're building a lot of lineups. One lineup I don't think I'm having the Chief in it. Now we'll stop there for now. We'll come back to it if there's any further questions, but that is Portland in a nutshell. Dallas, still no kind of lineup or nothing there. They love Layman in Portland. They love him. You can't see him. I'm not saying they're gonna totally expurgate him from the lineup. I'm saying I don't think he plays 30 minutes for the rest of the year. You can't see them cutting his minutes anytime soon. Local media and public perception, all those things really do factor into this. So I will not dispute you. I will just say that and admittedly, I've seen Jake Layman play around 100 to 200 minutes of basketball and all these other guys. I've seen a lot more. So maybe he's better than I'm giving him credit for. Maybe he's not as bad defensively. But it just doesn't seem like he would do as much for this team as, minutes he's taking from. Certainly, like, you could tell me he's better than Rodney Hood. Okay, I could believe that. I can't. I'd be really surprised if at the end of the day he was better for this team in the long run than certainly Evan Turner or Mo Harkless. But I will keep watching. I will certainly watch the game today, and maybe I'll be super impressed and recant. One lineup, DK. Who's the two studs you're building around? I don't know if I'm building around anyone, but the three studs I'd be most inclined and would have in the greatest share of lineups is Joel Embiid, Damian Lillard, and Yusuf Nurkic, I think. Yeah, pretty close. This pricing makes things a lot different on DK than FanDuel. Like FanDuel, LeBron is much more attractively priced, and you have only the one center spot. So, like, LeBron, I like tons more on FanDuel, and Embiid, I like tons more on DraftKings. That being said, those are fairly intuitive points to which to draw. And I would expect the public to also go somewhere that way. Let's move on, because somehow we're being too slow on a 2-game slate, which, and when I say we, I mean me. But, so let's look at the Mavs. I have, on FanDuel, actually on both FanDuel and DraftKings, I would slightly prefer Damian Lillard to Luka Doncic. Obviously, FanDuel, you're dealing with different positions, and you're spending $200 more on Lillard. I have Lillard projected for 1.5 higher. It's not the best matchup for Luka Doncic. He's dealing with a hand issue, which I don't think is significant. It may be totally irrelevant. But based on position and based on matchup, I'm a little higher on Lillard than Luka, and I am a big fan of Luka Doncic. I love watching the guy play basketball, but especially where I'm saving $400 on DK, that's pretty easy for me. I will say on FanDuel, the big advantage to playing Damian Lillard is that point guard is a bit of a morass after Rondo. I really like $6,100 Rondo on FanDuel. That makes a ton of sense. After that, you're doing something you really don't like, probably. Like, literally, these are the point guards on FanDuel. $6,100 Rondo. Thumbs up, who I expect to be like 70% owned because he's pretty clearly the superlative play. $8,900 Ben Simmons. Okay. $10,000 Damian Lillard. Okay. Both of them, I project to get not terribly impressive scores on FanDuel. I think I had Ben Simmons at like 42 and Damian Lillard at like 50. Neither of which make you feel super happy at 9 and 10K, but certainly you can do one of those guys, and many, many people will. Trey Burke at 5,200. Okay, that's a little different than 37 on DK. Jalen Brunson at 4,900. That makes me a little nauseous. TJ McConnell at 38 with, the Fantastic Five and all hands on deck now, and okay, that seems tough to imagine that working. Seth Curry, who may get himself totally cleared out of this lineup. Devin Harris, whose minutes are also imperiled, if not entirely eradicated, by the coming of Trey Burke. Alex Caruso, and Daryl Macon. So those are the point guards. So, yeah. You should probably be playing Rondo, Simmons, and Lillard in some tessellation of those plays and let the rest go. Could you get the Jalen Brunson game? I guess. At FanDuel scoring 4,900, I'm going to let Jalen Brunson go. But if you told me I had to play a fourth one of these guys, it's him. Actually, no, it's probably one of the pure punts. So FanDuel totally sucks today. Well, the point guard selection leaves something to be desired. And again, feel free to blame the sites, because they could have nice 5-game slates, and this is why we can't have nice things. So, yeah, Jalen Brunson, I don't really want to play him on FanDuel, where he's 4,900. I don't want to play him on DK, where he's 4,000, and if he plays 21 minutes and scores 13 fantasy points, I have to accept that score. He's not out of play on a 2-game slate. I'm going to be surprised if he's the guy I regret not being a bigger fan of at the end of the day. Again, everyone here priced significantly better on DraftKings. Doncic is $600 cheaper. Hardaway is $700 cheaper. Dorian Finney-Smith is $700 cheaper. Kleber is $900 cheaper. Brunson is $900 cheaper. Dwight Powell is $1,000 cheaper. Trey Burke is $1,500 cheaper. So, like, all the plays I have any interest in feel pretty good on FanDuel, and all of them on feel pretty good on DraftKings. All of them on FanDuel are very Tim Hardaway Jr., I expect him to start. I expect him to see 30 minutes. I expect him to be in a pretty difficult matchup that he hasn't been great in the past. He's still a guy who carries a ton of upside. If you're looking to get a guy from this game, just to have a guy from this game, and the value bigs, or I don't know if you even call like Dwight Powell value anymore. Thoughts on Reggie Bullock on FanDuel? I presume we'll get to that game in a second. Difficult to really guess at what amount of minutes he's going to get, and now that we just got Josh Hart will play news. I think he's 5,100. I have no interest. Literally none. If they announce he's starting, then sure, $5,100 Reggie Bullock is fine. Otherwise, I just don't think he plays any minutes. I mean, in the Celtic game, let's I don't have this up in front of me because again, I've been doing most of my research on the phone today. Yeah, in the Celtics game, you got 30 minutes out of JaVale McGee. The starters played 30 for JaVale, and 30 is a lot for him. 34, 35, 40, and 38. So, KCP played 23 off the bench. Lance played 17. Josh Hart played 8 minutes in that game. So now we can assume Hart's role comes up. Like, what do we see happening with Bullock? Whose minutes does he get? Does he get Brandon Ingram's? Maybe he gets some. Brandon Ingram played 40 minutes. I think they'd like to bring that down. Sorry, I'll give him 5 from Brandon Ingram. Maybe a couple from Kuzma. I'd be really surprised to see Reggie Bullock play more than 20 minutes. Could he repeatedly, get isolation on JJ Redick? Could it happen? Sure. I'll never tell someone not to play a player I expect to see the court and see some sort of time on a 2-game slate, but I think the likelihood is that Reggie Bullock sees minutes in the teens, and that certainly at $5,100 that is unlikely to prove overly fruitful. So finishing up on Dallas real quick. I like whoever's not starting among the centers. I expect that to be Dwight Powell. I totally understand if you want to save the $500 or $600 you save and play Kleber instead. I think that's just fine as well. I'm just in a tournament. I'm upside hunting. I think that's a little more likely for the bench guy, who's also less likely to be the foul trouble guy and may randomly fall into 30 minutes that way. We should talk about Trey Burke. I'm not at all confident that Trey Burke continues to get the significant minutes he saw in the last game. But even if you think he gets 20 minutes at the DK price of $3,700, that's certainly a number he can get on top of. The matchup is not ideal, but better against the second unit where he'll get some significant proportion of his time. And, I don't expect... let's use this as a nice segue and take a look at our ownership for the day. So again, I am part and parcel of the beautiful crew over at Awesemo.com. Among the many services you get being one of our members are the industry best ownership projections. They are much like Yusuf Nurkic, the tits. And, in a rough go like fantasy basketball these days, and it is really difficult to get on top of that rake. Early slate ownership projections. We have early slate ownership projections, night slate, main slate. So I had to click around a little bit to find everything, but pretty good stuff here. So looking at our ownership projections right now, number one on DK we have is a tie between Luka Doncic and Damian Lillard at 54%. That seems like about the case, and they are both only slightly higher than Simmons and Butler, and frankly LeBron are all those guys are 45 to 54%. So that's a lot of high price studs. So we're going to see some interesting value choices. I mean, the prices on the 6th highest owned players we have right now are $7,700 or higher. So it's going to be interesting seeing people get to some value to support those things. Again, we have Lillard and Doncic even. I would prefer Lillard at this point for the matchup and a couple other reasons. There's nothing wrong with playing Doncic. I just think it's slightly more likely he fails. I think Lillard is a little safer and has a pretty similar upside. Yeah, I mean, you can see just a crazy Doncic game with a team that has lost a lot of high usage pieces and just going nuts. Like, yes, if I saw 75 out of Doncic today, I wouldn't be surprised. So he may... both he and Lillard still carry a pretty large upside. Lillard just going against a team that is devoid of many good defenders anymore certainly has a pretty significant upside there as well. We then have, in a block, Simmons and Butler coming in at 8,200 and 7,200. These are DK numbers. We can talk about FanDuel numbers if we have time. Yeah, both those numbers make a ton of sense. Both those numbers are too cheap in a matchup against the Lakers, which we'll get into more in depth in a moment. I would be lying if I said I feel like I have a great grasp on the Fantastic Five. The shout out to Ben Simmons, who can be Ben Grimm in the Fantastic Five. I think that means that JJ Redick ends up being Sue Storm. Sorry, JJ, but you're just too cute. If I'm just saying, if one of the guys starting for the 76ers has got to put on a blonde wig and play Sue Storm, you're going to do the best job at it. Joel would be the funniest, but you do the best job. I'm just saying, if we were in prison, let's say the Fantastic Five get sent to prison, and one of them has to, give it up so sweet to keep the whole team safe. I think there would be the most interest in JJ Redick. That's all I'm saying. I don't know. Jimmy Butler's pretty cute too. And the hair. I don't know. I'm going to have to revise this. This is important stuff. I'll do some analysis on this later. Embiid projected for 9% on DK. Yeah. My actual version actually says 10% right now, so there must have been. We update this pretty frequently. And the moment you see Joel Embiid will play, obviously that number is going to come up significantly. But all right, so let's do some takeaways from this. First of all is very difficult on a 2-game slate to be terribly precise with these numbers, but worth pointing out that Embiid is going to be under-owned. Rename it to the Sexy Six, add Boban to the crew. Sure. And Boban clearly would play Dr. Doom in the movie. But, if all the other 76ers are going to be, 20, 35, 40% owned, and Embiid is going to be 11, have an Embiid plan. You got 30 minutes. We hopefully will know. And again, this is DK, so when you build your lineup, play enough guys from the late game and put those guys in the late slots, so in the event that Embiid plays, you can swap-a-dee-doubly-do and end up with some Joel Embiid in your lineups, because one of the things that, there's many things people don't understand about late swap, and I did what I think was a really good video about late swap, and how people are constantly begging for something that literally just bends them over and screws them constantly. But one of the things is, not that many people do it. We've had a number of 6-digit winners at Awesemo.com this year just based on people making pretty ideal swaps and getting guys at 3% owned because of late news. So on a Sunday, if the news that Embiid is starting does not hit by 3, which it probably will, as in 30 minutes from now, but 30 minutes before the start of that game, he ends up being just drastically underowned. I would guess right now that it ends up being like 18%. And for 10,000 whatever Joel Embiid against the Lakers, that's ridiculously underowned and instantly becomes the best play on the slate. So, I like having the bottom of your DK lineup look something like Rondo, Simmons, Boban. And in the event Embiid comes in, you strike that whole thing, you put Embiid in the second center spot, in the utility spot, and play... you obviously have to strike Simmons then, so you buy him down to whatever, or you strike the other guys and turn them into a couple cheap guys, and you get a pretty massive spot. Who's going to be on LeBron, Butler, or Harris? That's a pretty good question. I imagine it will start with Butler, and they'll swing Redick over onto, which, gives you some reason to like Ingram, I think. There will be plenty between these teams, especially if swapping, so I would not overly consider that terribly the most relevant thing, but I'm pretty sure you'll get Butler on LeBron to start as much as possible. And you'll get Tobias Harris on Kyle Kuzma. So anyhow, let's get back and talk about this game a little bit so we have time for questions and things of that ilk. So we handled that other game pretty well. I think we talked about all the relevant pieces. I didn't talk about Dorian Finney-Smith. He is a relevant piece. You can play him on a 2-game slate. I'm historically very anti-Dorian Finney-Smith. He's in that TJ Leaf class of player. As previously mentioned, why isn't anybody on McCollum on DK? Look, McCollum has played extremely well recently. You can't, deny that he's, done better than we projected, but I do think that a lot of that is, some fairly impressive shooting. Like over the last 3 games, his 3-pointers are 3 for 5, 7 for 14, 7 for 13. Now, and his last 4 games, he's got 60, 55, 47, 41 fantasy points. The reason I am not super excited about it is the fact that I can't find anything that it's apropos of. It started before the trade deadline and extended past the trade deadline, so I don't think it's relevant to any personnel changes. I don't see any particular defect or hitch in Lillard's shot or change in the rotations that they're doing that is terribly specific. Again, all of this production is coming from just shooting apeshit crazy. Like, his assists the last 3 games are 2, 2, and 1. So, there's been times earlier this year where I said, I'm starting to like McCollum a lot again. What's going on is rather than playing almost all his minutes next to Damian Lillard, with Evan Turner out for a while, I really like CJ McCollum more because he's running the second unit. So that projects him to get a few more shots and to start picking up assists again. So I really like CJ McCollum. Like that's a a theory that makes sense. I don't have any rhyme or reason all of a sudden for CJ McCollum to shoot 60% from 3 and 70% from the field and score 50 fantasy points a night. Certainly that price on DK is attractive. It's $6,800. And again, just, if you want to game log watch it, his last 4 games are 62, 41, 47, 56 fantasy points. That's all pretty sexy. And 2 of those games against the Spurs in Utah, and one of them against Miami, actually, come to think of it. So he's got, 3 of those 4 games against pretty decent opponents. So, okay. I will say that, all those teams have a better ability to sell out and stop Dame, which allows him to be more likely to get more shots. I mean, let's talk about just shot attempts. In those 4 games, he took 17, 21, 23, and 25 shots. Okay? That's more than he usually takes. I don't have it in front of me. I will presume for the year his average shots taken in a game tend to be somewhere around 13, I'll guess, 14, maybe 15. Something like a field goal attempts for CJ McCollum on the year if they want. Let me know on that one. Meanwhile, Lillard's shooting he's taking a couple fewer shots than recently. He's got a 15, 16, 20, and 21 out of the last 4. That's slightly below average. But I guess long story being, I don't have any terrible reason to think that all of a sudden this is, nuts CJ McCollum. I think he's great to play. I like him less than Lillard. I like him less than Nurkic. If you're not playing both of them, I'm a big fan of playing CJ McCollum on DK. And I guess I didn't specifically as such say so I appreciate you bringing me back to the point. But yeah, he's obviously been in great form, and it can't be overstated that while the pace is not what we're getting out of Philadelphia and the Lakers, this is a bad defensive Dallas team. I mean, Portland is favored significantly on the road for a reason. So, yeah. And again, to go full circle and bring it back to what we were talking about, let me look at the ownership. We have McCollum 8th. And that's the other reason I was personally disinclined. We have him right now at 32%. That's a pretty big chunk. And again, everyone's going to have really high relative ownership due to the fact that we're looking at just a 2-game slate. But it's not like you're getting him like you were at the beginning of that streak where because he had been doing his standard 30 fantasy points a night, he was 8% owned every night. So for all those reasons, I suspect the public are a little more disinclined. But when you say, why is no one talking about him at 6,800? I wasn't. I'm sure partially because of my own personal biases and not explaining it fully. But yeah, I am. If he's going to be 32% owned, I would have less. I would have a significant amount because there is no reason. He's obviously in great form, coming off 4 big games with 40 fantasy points in each, averaging about 50. That's very sexy for 6,800 against the Mavs. So talked that through quite a bit, but thank you for bringing that up because I did not give him his due. So talking about the Lakers, again, most advantageously priced on FanDuel. Difficult for me to like anyone who isn't starting here. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope at 3,600 on FanDuel, I think, makes an absolutely fine punt. Reggie Bullock, I believe, is the minimum on DK. That, at least, I can understand your rhyme and your reason. You are but mad north by northwest. I think they're at least, sure, on a 2-game slate, you can press me to take a shot on Reggie Bullock at the absolute flat 3K minimum on DK. I still don't like it. I like Boban more. I presume, many players more and probably several 3K players more, but that at least doesn't strike me as pure insanity. I think he plays 15 to 18 minutes or so. Ingram with Braun there and Rondo there, struggles are notable, but he is really cheap at this point. He is at least appropriately priced in the mid-5s. Am I okay with playing Boban and Embiid in the same lineup? I don't think it is ideal, but I would still probably rather run Embiid Boban than Embiid Reggie Bullock, if that makes sense to you. So I'm not like, sweet, I've got them both. I do think there's some obvious negative correlation between the starting center and the backup center. But no issue if that's where you happen to land. I like LeBron plenty in this matchup. I have him projected for about 58. That feels just fine. It feels pretty good on FanDuel. It feels a little less good on DK, where if he plays, I have Embiid projected for more, and so many other guys are discounted. Just dealing with, Ben Simmons. Again, so the 76 are so much cheaper on DraftKings, where Embiid is 1,500 less. Jimmy Butler is 1,600 less. Ben Simmons is 700 less. Jonathan Simmons will be... So for both these teams, for the second game, it's really hard to go to the bench. I guess I want to mention real quick. And I will get to questions in just a minute. But it is really hard to go to the bench here. Everyone's getting more people in. Jonathan Simmons is expected to make his debut for the 76ers. So now you've got Simmons and Scott and McConnell and Furkan and James Ennis III, and there's just a lot of dudes in there. So unless you are playing the blowout, which is fine, and again on a 2-game slate, you may have to play a starter in the game even if you're playing the blowout. So you may have to end up with I'm playing a blowout in the second game, I think the 76ers whoop them, or vice versa. But I still ended up having to have a share of Jimmy Butler and Brandon Ingram. That is gonna happen sometimes. 2-game slate, you will have to make that play. But so the 76ers, again, the fantastic 5 here. I was surprised to see. We have a 1-game sample here, and it didn't tell us a ton. We got a ceiling game out of JJ Redick, and that's something that's going to happen a lot here. His volume, his usage should come down significantly, and his efficiency should skyrocket, because God forbid Ben Simmons could shoot. I really don't know how you would defend this team, but still, as it is, having to deal with Simmons and Butler and Harris and Embiid, you are going to get some wide ass open threes for JJ Redick. Is the basic way it comes down to. So, he's the guy who can make 85% of his open 3-pointers. So, if he keeps getting 10 wide open threes a game, him shooting 8 for 10 from 3 would not be a strange thing at all. So, I'm perfectly fine going back to JJ Redick, small forward on FanDuel, which is an interesting wrinkle in that. I do think Jimmy Butler is just underpriced for the matchup on DK at 7,200. I very slightly prefer him to Tobias Harris there. On FanDuel, I will obviously save the $2,000 and play Tobias Harris and not Jimmy Butler, but I very slightly prefer Jimmy Butler for 600 more on DK to Tobias Harris. I've had that question a couple of times. This might be the obvious, but I should say this. Also have a plan for if Embiid is out, not just to Boban, who I do think starts. I don't think he plays more than 22, 24 minutes, so I would not go, I'd probably have him in almost every DK lineup at that point if we get Embiid is out and Boban is starting, because he's going to be the best value on the slate by a huge measure, and we're down to 17 minutes for it to lock right now, so I wouldn't expect a lot of people to be there. But it is worth pointing out that you do need to carry over that bonus to the rest of the team. Harris and Butler and Simmons all get very sexy in those circumstances. You will get more minutes out of Mike Scott, so it is worth having a Embiid out plan beyond just Boban. Going back to the Lakers for a second there. So Ingram and Kuzma are now appropriately priced. I think they're very good tournament plays. I prefer playing Rondo, I think, especially on FanDuel, where that price is particularly brilliant. But, we're now at a point where I do expect them to see a full load of minutes. And those guys in the mid-5s on a 2-game slate still feel really good for me. I slightly prefer Kuzma to Ingram, if that is a question. It is worth mentioning that the Mavericks, let me get this right. Yeah, the Mavericks and the Trailblazers do play again tomorrow. and Rick Carlisle, especially with new toys. I'm a little less happy with I'm a little more concerned about the minutes for the Mavericks than the Trailblazers. I'll put it that way. Or I'm a little more concerned with the minutes due to the blowout because of that. The Trailblazers have their own load management issues with dealing with the 5 small forwards and all the other things. There's certainly some concern for the minutes for some of those players, but I'm more concerned that the back-to-back would inhibit a maybe not 100% Luka, and Carlisle a little more predisposed to screwing that up than Stotts. Let's see, what else? I like JaVale McGee. These two teams played, I want to say it was the end of January, give or take. And that was one of the games Zubac started, and I thought that was kind of a dick move, honestly, by Walton, because he was pretty clearly going to get shit on by Embiid. And unsurprisingly, was shit on by Embiid, having a pretty difficult game. I can't find it, but JaVale came off the bench in that game, looked better against Joel Embiid than I would have thought. I think he played about 28 minutes off the bench in that game and had 40-something fantasy points. Would project him for well less than that, but the absence of Zubac there. And again, yes, the Mavs re-signed Salah Mejri, but he won't play today. Someone just asked. But the absence there of Zubac to take more of the center minutes. It's not that we can't see random, certainly Kuzma at the 5 or LeBron at the 5, but I think there's a real chance to get 30 minutes out of McGee here, and again, looked better against Embiid last time than I would have expected. So he's in my panoply of favorite center plays on DK. There's other guys you can play, but at the moment, the guys I'd be trying to get into lineups would be Embiid, McGee, JaVale, and Boban. And I think JaVale, probably my second favorite center on FanDuel after Nurkic at the moment. Let's just roll into some questions here. I'm going to start in the premium Slack chat and answer anything that comes up. Can you cover the Boban situation again? Would you? All right, let me back all the way up and start at the top. I'll get there in a second. Who's going to be on LeBron, Butler, Harris? We did that. Why isn't people on McCollum? We did that. Would you prioritize Embiid over LeBron regardless of whether it's FanDuel or DraftKings, price notwithstanding? Well, FanDuel, the issue is you may not know if Embiid is necessarily playing. So if we get news that Embiid is playing, yes, I would probably rather have Embiid in my one lineup than LeBron in my one lineup because of ownership of 13% to 50%. So, yes, I would prioritize on both sites. You just may not be able to do so on FanDuel without taking a very significant risk. And the caveat to that is I don't mind playing Embiid without knowing. Let's assume he's 50-50 at the moment, and that's the best approximation we can make with questionable, with no additional information. I'm fine taking that risk on a 2-game slate. You need to understand it's a risk, and there's around a 50% chance you just lose, or at least leave yourself to having to nut out to min cash, because when you drop your 11K and change player, you're not winning any tournaments. But I'm fine with that. Just understand that it's a risk, but without news, you're going to be getting 4% Embiid against the Lakers, and that strikes me as something that has a significant upside. Can you cover the Boban situation again? Yeah, Embiid may not play, and they may blow them the hell out, and he costs $3,000, and he's a good basketball player, and I'm a big fan of playing Boban at $3,000. You're torn between Ingram and Hardaway on DK, leaning Hardaway. Yeah, I would be similarly torn. I will lean Ingram slightly for the pace and everything. I think you were spending $300 more from getting that number right, but if that is moot, if that doesn't matter for your construction, I think I would slightly prefer Brandon Ingram, but I agree it's very, very close. Boban and Bullock, or JaVale and KCP in a FanDuel GPP. JaVale and KCP by a mile. You're playing Tobias. Should I go to Simmons? You are playing Tobias. Should you play Simmons and Kleber or Butler and Powell? Based on everything we know right now, I'll say Butler and Powell. They say he's unlikely to play for Simmons. Fast Eddie Fear. I don't know what that means, Ian Brown. Or Simmons is unlikely to play but is playing? All right, I don't know what any of that meant, Ian Brown. If you could clarify that. Are you talking about John Simmons? I'm guessing you're talking about John Simmons. Looks like Embiid is in. He has a check by his name on FanDuel. That check mark means absolutely nothing. It is literally worthless. It has a zero point 0.7 correlation to someone actually starting, so it's not entirely random, but it is meaningless, and you should not draw any conclusions by the green check mark. You think this game stays close? Kuz going to have to drop threes. Kuzma, Butler, or Maxey and Simmons? I think I would barely Maxey and Simmons, but I like that. Yes, they are confusing people at the check mark. I've worked for DFS sites for the last 7 years, and a real thing is you want people to hang out at your site and be there and be a one-stop shop, so you want to provide a lot of information, but you don't want to be responsible for it. Like, what do you do when someone calls you and says, yeah, I saw the check mark, which I thought meant starting, and I played Embiid, and then he didn't play. What the fuck, FanDuel? Like, what's your answer? So whenever you take responsibility to provide information, that is a tough spot. Rondo and Layman, or Maxey, or Hardaway and Kuzma, single entry DK. You also have Trey Burke and Powell. I would play Rondo and Maxey. I'm certainly playing Maxey over Layman at this point. It's not that I don't think Layman can get there. But I will go with much lower ownership. According to tweets, Embiid is on the court taking shots. Yeah, if he is now on the court taking shots, and again, one of the tough things about doing solo shows is normally when the other person is talking, I'm scouting and looking at footage and looking at tweets and following beat reporters, and because I have to talk constantly, I really can't do all those things at once. But he's on the court taking shots. Okay, so now I would probably say he's 70-30 to play, and I'm a bigger fan of finding a way to get him into your lineups. Still definitely possible he sits out, but he's dealing with an illness. So if he's managed to, get on his uniform, get out on the court, is taking shots, getting a little adrenaline and a sweat going, usually he's going to play. There's obviously the additional possibility that he is to some degree limited, but this I would consider an upgrade to Embiid and a downgrade to Boban, the fact that he's out there shooting. Philly Lakers is national TV. Betting Embiid gonna play. Probably relevant. The guy obviously does not mind being a celebrity. Motivation is a lot. How do I feel about Trey Burke? I like Burke a lot on DK, and I don't think he's out of play on FanDuel on a 2-game slate. I really don't want to go there. You basically have 3 point guards on FanDuel. But 3,700, there's an upside to be achieved there. And again, I think our projected ownership, which I will refresh one more time, has him at in the 20% range, which you're not excited. You want him at 5, but it's a 2-game slate. That's just not going to happen for you. Trey Burke, 23. We have it right now. Let's see. Blazers will start Lillard, McCollum, Harkless, Aminu, Nurkic as expected. Mavs will start Doncic, Brunson, Hardaway, Finney-Smith, and Kleber as expected. Yeah, I didn't think they would go bigger. So at this point, if you have the salary and it's moot, I do prefer Powell. Thoughts on Muscala on a FanDuel GPP? Yeah, that is really the only context in which I want to try him in. Now, he's center on FanDuel, I think. I want to be able to drop him because it's really difficult to know what we're going to see out of Moose here. I would rather still Boban. I think you're a little more likely to sort of hit the ceiling, but not crazy. Redick over Hardaway. It really comes down to an ownership question that I'm going to have them projected pretty similarly to each other. We have Hardaway at 23%, and I imagine these are DK numbers. We have Redick at 30, so I think I slightly prefer Redick, and in the better game and a better matchup for him, but 7% higher owned. So really, to me, it would come down with correlating with whichever game I had the greater exposure to previously to that query. That is Joel Embiid on the court. That he is. I can't tell if I think it's Toby guarding him there. Can't tell. That is one fuzzy ass picture from someone at the game. Did you talk about Bullock? What are your projections for him? I think he plays. I'll go with 17 minutes. I don't think they start him. I don't think they run him out there and give him full whatever this time. I think Hart being back is also a disincentive for him. So 3K Bullock I can see running out there. 5,100 to me seems very close to out of play. Again, I'm not a big fan of using the words out of play on a slate of this size, but he's matchup's fine, but he's just certainly a spot where it would be weird to see, of all the players out there on the court in this game, him being the one who all of a sudden is getting the time and the usage. So could happen. Seems a little dicey. No, Zach Collins is he didn't play in the second half last game. And they went pretty heavily to Myers Leonard in the blowout game there. So if you're trying to make that play, I think it's Myers Leonard would be the guy you're trying to look at there. McCollum on FanDuel does make a lot of sense now that I look at the pricing, just because of really the paucity of terribly good guys. I mean, obviously Butler's good, but he's 9K. Doncic is good, but he's 10K. So, trying to come up with just players who will score any fantasy points at shooting guard again is really tough. Like, I really like KCP for $3,600. Like, I can see having FanDuel constructions that have KCP and Josh Hart in them, just because hopefully one of them's good and the other one hopefully is your drop. Is it crazy to play Nurk over Embiid? No, I love Nurkic. It's not crazy to play him under any circumstances. You can Herc a Nurk all you want to. But yeah, shooting guard is really thin there. Again, Hardaway 58 is fine. But there's no one who's priced terribly well on that site that you're looking at and trying to get a big piece of. So I'm going to transition into talking less and scanning for news nor. THJ or JJ, Redick or Tim Hardaway Jr. on DK is a question that I just handled, and it's Redick is going to be higher owned, and I do like him a little bit more. So for me, I want to focus on one game more if possible. So I want the one that gives me the 6-2 split, not the 5-3 split, if that makes any sense. So if of the other 7 players, if you have more from the earlier game, play Tim Hardaway Jr. If you have more from the later game, play JJ Redick. I would like to try to continue to polarize my lineup to one of those extents, if at all possible. Good question, but this is my answer. So, starting my news, I will be back in 2 hours. I'm going to get off at 3, if you know what I mean. But I'll be back at 5, and again, have similarly long period of time. We'll have rankings in for that late slate. And good times all around. So right now I'm just news digging. Dig it. Tobias, Butler, Redick in the same line, too much. No. There are only 4 teams. So if you're playing on FanDuel, you're going to have an average of 2.25 guys. And if you're on DK, you're going to have an average of 2 guys per team. So 3 is literally as few guys as you can have from the team and be overweight at all. So no, 3 is very nice. But no, that's just fine. So, looking for news. Apologies for horrible radio silence and quiet, but that's how that goes sometimes. Favorite small forward on FanDuel, 4.1K or less. Rodney Hood. Almost sure. I'll go look, but I'm pretty sure it's Rodney Hood. Rodney Hood between those guys. Yeah, I mean, Justin Jackson is in. He played like 4 minutes last game. I don't think that happens. Thoughts on playing Harkless? Fine on FanDuel. DK, fine, but obviously incredibly risky. Probably going to start. Probably going to see 19 minutes. Probably not going to do enough with them. But at his price, I don't have a problem with Mo Harkless in tournaments. And again, I'm fine playing him instead of, say, Jake Layman. Like, that feels okay to me. right, coming down to it, everybody. We are coming down to it. Nothing hitting terribly hard. Which, again, I don't think you really should expect anything to go completely crazy when there is literally one game that we have the lines for and another one starting in a half hour. So, you know, it's good. No reason to expect shit to go absolutely crazy. But yeah, have an Embiid plan. Have a by extension, a Boban plan. Probably a perfectly reasonable way to refer to it. And we are coming down to it, about 30 seconds. All right. 10, 9, 8. We are all locked up. So go ahead and take a minute and look at some ownership. Then we'll get out of here, and I'll be back somewhere around 5 o'clock Eastern. 2 o'clock on the left coast. All right, let's see if we can find some ownership. All right, DK, apparently you had a 300K. Yeah, I was originally going to do just one show today, but they really, both sites broke it up into two pretty significant slates, both with a pretty decent top prize. So it seemed worth doing only a late show would obviously not have covered the significant early game slates, and doing only an early show, I couldn't react to any of the presumably significant news that comes out between now and then. So DK is being squirrely, so I'm going to look at FanDuel for a moment while we're waiting. What do we have here? 200K on FanDuel, which is just fine for early on a Sunday. Maxi Kleber 30%, Rodney Hood 22%, because again, FanDuel you had to play two small forwards. Dorian Finney-Smith 18%, Luka Doncic 40, 39 to be precise. Al-Farouq Aminu 24, Lillard 37, McCollum 54, Jake Layman 18. Don't mind him at 18. Again, that price on FanDuel though is a kick in the pants. Trey Burke 30% at 5,200 on FanDuel. Get there. Need to use all your get theres. Dwight Powell 9% at center. I'm really curious what you end up with the center ownership for Joel Embiid on FanDuel. I really think you get it at like, I don't know, 12%, 9%, some really sexy small number. So that is a ton of fun. Let's see if DraftKings is responding now. A 300K on DK, which apparently filled, so good to them. Good for us too, because they will keep doing it if they can run a 300K for a 2-game early Sunday slate and fill the sucker. They will do it again. Trying to export lineups. Lillard 44, Burke 41, Powell 22, Nurkic 34. Hey, the thing finally downloaded, so I can stop just poking around. McCollum 40. So I mean, that's you who were concerned that McCollum would not be appropriately owned. Your fears have been assuaged. He was 40% owned. Loading. And okay, here we go. Are we close? We gonna do this thing? Alright, there it is. Alright, yes, the most owned player on the early slate was Damian Lillard at 44.6%. That feels pretty good. Trey Burke at 41%. At 41%, I would want to come in under that number. Like, he's relevant. You could look at him. Obviously, there's big ceiling, big floor there. But in a not ideal matchup as chalky, yeah, I'd probably look elsewhere. Just a little bit less. McCollum 39, Luka 35. Okay. We thought we'd be up there with Lillard, being well less. Jake Layman 28. Again, I'd probably want to be under that. Tim Hardaway Jr. 28. Dorian Finney-Smith 27. I definitely want to be under on that. Maxi Kleber 23. Would like that a little bit more, although again. Dwight Powell 22 rather, and I do like him a little bit more, even though he's not starting. I want the guy getting less Nurkic. Rodney Hood 17, sure. Aminu 14, Jalen Brunson 12.6, then all the way down to Evan Turner 2.3. Yeah, I don't mind these guys at 2% as potential tournament winners. Myers Leonard 2%, sure. Don't play him with Nurkic, but he's the straight backup now. Dirk 1.6. Oh, okay. Mo Harkless 1.3, Ryan Brokoff 0.85. That might be too cute. Zach Collins 0.7, Seth Curry 0.69, Devin Harris 0.35. Might be too cute. Justin Jackson 0.34, Costas Antetokounmpo 0.08, Scalabissiere 0.07, Salah Mejri 0.06. Congratulations, you played yourself. He's actually not active. He did resign with the team, but is technically not active for today's game. Courtney Lee 0.03. Do expect him to play. Zach Randolph, I don't think plays. Gary Trent Jr., I don't think plays. Anthony Simmons would need to be blowout. And Kristaps certainly won't play, the guy who bought a share of that. So yeah, we are done for the moment. I will be back with some rankings and a second show in a hair less than 2 hours, where I think one of the sites has a 2-game slate and the other one has a 3-game slate. But I shall see you then. Good luck.